It is Wednesday, September 26th, at 5 o'clock. This is for the special council meeting for budgets. Media has been notified. Clerk, please call the roll call.
There we go. Tom Kelly.
Here.
Stephen Jopek.
Here.
Eileen Daniel.
Here.
Kiri Mikulowski. Gerald Anderson. Here. Thomas Barnett.
Here.
David Holt. Leanne Felton.
Here.
Chris Hannes.
Here. We have quorum, pledge of allegiance. Okay. Anyone for public comment for the budget hearing? Okay, not seeing anyone for public comment. Moving on to new budget round 2. Refer to Zach and Wendy.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Again, thanks for pulling together to talk about the next batch of budgets. You all have paper copies in front of you, and then I'll also, as with last week, I'll try to follow along on the computer up here too, if I can get the Zoom to be just right. I don't think there's any other opening comments other than let's roll right into library being the first budget in this section. For those that are new, or as a refresher, the City of Rhinelander participates in the Rhinelander District Library. So that's a consortium of municipalities who are on the second page of the budget. Tom Kelly can probably speak to some more intimate details. I believe he's still on the library board as a city's representative there. Their request, as you will see, based upon the Rhinelander allocation, which is on that second page, the final box, you'll see the percent change across the various municipalities. And there is a pretty elaborate formula, as I understand, that determines that based upon equalized value as well as material utilization from the various municipalities.
The circulation effect.
Circulation, checkout, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So you'll see the balance there. The Rhinelander allocation is, at least as the board has adopted the budget at their level, a $35,000 increase, with the other municipalities included, for a total of $107,000 in additional budget growth for 2023.
We are going to arbitration. We just haven't set a date yet.
That's right. It's our understanding
Pine Lake has requested. I got the letter today.
And Crescent, I think today.
Yeah, but Pine Lake has formally requested it in the form of a letter.
Yes, right.
that.
Officially, yep. So
we
it
just
sounds
have-
like it'll go to arbitration, where the municipalities will all participate.
Yeah, they all argue and complain, and
And
nobody's got any money.
yeah, right. It's fairly substantial increases across the board. So
Yeah,
I guess we'll wait pending the results of that arbitration. There really isn't much more to discuss at this time, unless, Tom, you've got other knowledge or if others have questions.
Well, we're requesting the same as we did last year, right?
In terms of the total allocation,
Yeah. 315, 389?
well, there's a $35,000 increase.
Yeah.
So about 10%,
Yeah.
based upon the formula and the.
This was a document that I had from Virginia, and I wanted to show the 22 compared to the 23, but she didn't quite give me an updated version. And if you look in the revenue section of this, she had just copied the 23 in both columns. So that's not accurate, what's in the 22 column from revenues, but the expenses, starting with the salaries, is accurate. So I didn't want to lose half of it.
Okay.
Yeah, the revenue still shows a 315 on that first page at the top, the revenue portion. So to be continued, I guess, on the library front. That arbitration would be a public meeting, I believe. It's publicly noticed, just like any
We
other.
haven't set a date yet, but I'll let you know.
Okay, great.
Because you want to come.
Yeah, right. We want to be present, at
Yeah,
least
you
to
didn't show
observe.
up last year, but
Did they go to arbitration last year?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Every year it's always.
Oh, I think our increase was less. It was
usually
negligible.
Pine Lake that requests.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
We'll move on to The fire department, chief and assistant chief are here. Have them come up to the podium if there are questions for them or points they want to make. A couple notes on the fire department and then the accompanying ambulance special revenue fund. It's been the practice of the city to have a percentage allocation on the salaries of the positions. With the new chief and with Wendy and I a part of the process this year, we've taken a look at that again just to have it either align with operational experience. So you'll see staffing levels are unchanged, or not you'll see, but I'm telling you staffing levels are unchanged in their budget proposal or request. But the allocation is different. So you'll see, if you were to go to the ambulance special revenue fund, you'll see an increase in the salaries there. Again, due to that allocation, the percentage that's allocated between the fire department general fund and the ambulance special revenue fund. And then, so that would just be my, I guess, framing comment on the fire department. You'll also see that, and if you recall, we made some adjustments and modifications to the ambulance rates, and you'll see it's adequately reflecting in a bit of an increase in revenues collected. Obviously, that's a function of volume, but it's also a function of the collectible payer base. If it's private pay, self-pay versus insurance negotiated or Medicare, Medicaid. Reimbursement levels. And there's been also an increase, I don't remember the percentage, chief, maybe you can speak to at the state level, but they've, since some span of time, they've made some enhancements to that rate, which is obviously very welcome to our operations and funds. I don't know if you have anything specific to that.
I don't have a specific number for that right now.
He's also done a rate analysis with our billing provider, and we'll be bringing forward a recommendation to a future council meeting, again, enhancing or adjusting the rates partially due to budgetary need and inflationary costs, and also taking a look at the market and who we compare against in terms of rates. So that'll be coming forward probably at the next October meeting. And then as far as capital requests, they were successful in receiving a flex grant, 60,000 if I'm not mistaken.
85,000.
85,000. So ambulance is about 265. Is that where I got the 60?
We're figuring about 275 for an ambulance at the top right now. So minus the 85,000, we're about 190,000 requesting in the capital.
So you'll see at the bottom of the ambulance fund, the last item is a vehicle 275. We budget the full cost there, and then obviously we'll budget the income depending on the funding source and where that goes. So, yes, Gerald.
Do you have an extra copy of this budget
It was in your mailbox. We can maybe have Austin grab, or we've got an extra, or Lloyd's gonna grab it. Thanks, Lloyd. And I probably should be maybe following along on the computer here too. That would maybe be helpful. And then the other point, I guess, would be that subsidy, the transfer to the ambulance fund. Historically, it's been in the, as you saw in 2019, 179 was from the general fund. 2020 was 106. We budgeted 141 this year, but because of operations and collections in the ambulance fund, we've been able to make some good headwinds or inroads there, I should say, and you'll see the request is 14,000 of a transfer. It's all dependent upon how the ambulance fund performs, but all by and large, it's been I think a smoothing out or rebalancing of those funds, which is materializing. I guess you want to maybe highlight some of the training stuff. I know that was an area that we had some increase. Your approach to training is
We still in the fire or in the ambulance, which
I'm kind of back and forth here, so maybe go back to fire since
All right.
that's where the travel and training is
yeah.
mostly attributed to.
So
Wendy, is that extra one right here, Wendy, or is that last meetings? That one's last meetings? The 20? Oh, okay, sorry. Rachel's got an extra one here for you. I think we're set, Wendy, at least. She likes getting her steps in. Yeah, I think so the travel and training is 331 on the fire department page. That was one area where Brian has identified some more training opportunities, certainly with succession planning, new hires, that type of thing. It's it's obviously that much more important to offer the training. Do you want to speak to just a little more to that?
Yeah, so every year we have a third-party company come in and do our annual pump testing and pump maintenance and vehicle maintenance on our trucks. So on the ladder truck and the 2 engines, it costs us somewhere around $8,000 a year. Right now, the city doesn't have anybody that is certified to work on any of our fire trucks. We'd like to send Justin to school. We've talked to Justin Ernst about going to school and getting certified and credentialed to be able to work on our truck. The savings, or the cost for us for the first year is $6,000. We're willing to take that into our training budget and the fire budget and send him to get the certifications. We can pretty much do away with that third party at that time, and it saves us about $6,000 a year in that. So just sending Justin to school for 1 year, for every single year after that, saves us about $6,000. And then the only thing we'd need is a pump testing, which is about $2,000 a year. So it kind of, it makes sense for us. So when we have major breakdowns or anything like that, Justin's certified to recertify the truck to go back on the road rather than us having to call a third-party company vendor to come in. So we'll better utilize our people.
So obviously an upfront cost, but over time there's a benefit, plus having a little more control over that versus at the mercy of a vendor.
Yep.
Definitely I think a wise proposal. Yep, Stephen?
How does that change their job outlook, like what they're doing in their normal job?
As far as what Justin would do?
Yeah, as far as the additional certification process.
So
those
that's something
kinds.
that we'd have to talk through as at a department head level first and see how that would change it and kind of decide where that puts Justin. But it is an extra certification for him.
And being fully staffed now with the filling of the mechanic position, there's capacity there for Justin to be able to take that level of effort on.
Yep.
So question, and this kind of goes to all your, the hazardous material, the fire department ambulance fund. You're requesting $89,000 in overtime salary pay, if you combine them all. If we were to hire one more firefighter, where would you project that to go down by, or 2 or 3 or what have you?
Yeah, so for us, it really doesn't work person by person. It's shift by shift, so it's one person per shift. So it'd be 3 firefighters to be able to adjust that cost across the board. So we'd save approximately $72,000 a year in overtime costs if we would put on three extra personnel. I ran some preliminary numbers for that, and how it would look is for 3 firefighters, 1 firefighter, an initial cost for them to outfit them with PPE and everything, their gear, is about $5,000. So uniforms, that's everything right off the bat. So 3 firefighters, $15,000 would be a one-time cost for us. With our savings, each firefighter at the starting rate is about $57,337 for a total of $172,000 per year. With the savings and the benefits, with the savings from overtime pay, acting pay, and call-in time, we save approximately $76,850. So breaking that down annually, it would cost us an additional $155,000 for 3 firefighters. And then if we break that into the ambulance revenue fund at the 18%, that'd be about $28,000 to the ambulance fund. And on the general fund, it would be $127,000. But we could always split that differently if we could figure out what the ambulance revenue fund. So I would think that Wendy and I could probably have some pretty decent conversations about whether we could take that on in the ambulance revenue fund for the most part. And I'm pretty confident with the way that we're trending right now that we would be able to absorb that cost pretty readily. With our fee increase, the proposed fee increase coming up, our Medicaid from AB 874, it's a bill that's passed that for a Medicaid reimbursement rate, which is a higher reimbursement rate that we'll get from the ambulance funds that's supposed to start in January next year. So we'll be reimbursed at the federal rate rather than just the state rate, which has the potential to be very Well, it gives us quite a bit more revenue on our ambulance fund, almost up to $300,000. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Right now, we're trending towards about $26,000 ahead in the ambulance revenue fund of where we were last year. So that's where our projections are. So,
I know there's some runway with grants out there where it could help fund additional firefighters for a couple of years. Have we explored those or applied or what have you?
yeah, so the SAFER grant is one of the grants that's available out there. So if we would ask for 3 extra firefighters on the SAFER grant, we would have them for 3 years on the grant, and then we'd have to be able to either keep them and extend them past that 3 years and pay for them and have a plan, or we'd have to let them go. You can't extend them by another year per that grant. That's how that grant works. So it's kind of a stopgap, if you will. It's a temporary stopgap. So it's not a permanent grant for us.
What's the odds of receiving said grant and timetable roughly?
It's not a given. It's not a very easy one to get. You see some of the other departments out there. I've never done the numbers myself to kind of see what they're at, but it's not one where you're constantly hearing that someone's getting a SAFER grant with a career department like we are, like a full-time department like we are.
I think one Wisconsin municipality got it this year, town of Beloit maybe, that went to career, I think is how they were able to swing that.
Yeah.
Definitely competitive. for
Yeah, they
sure.
changed their whole structure and they use that to do that, yeah. Yeah.
We could also go to hazmat and tank inspection as well. Those are the subsequent 2 budgets within the fire department. Eileen had a question though before we go there.
Yeah, just quickly before we move on, looking at the ambulance special revenue fund, I always try to take a look at any big jumps in numbers from past years, and it looks like there's 2 of them on here. The first is telephone and the second is water and wastewater. Telephone's going from a projected 2022 budget of $800 to the 2023 request for $5,000.
That's right. So we had a corresponding rebalancing. As we talked through the line items, we really wanted to make sure the costs attributed with that service were being charged to the right budget. So that was a classic rebalancing between the fire department to the ambulance because there's modems, tablets, I mean, that kind of thing within the ambulance service.
Right. We went to some Surface Pros, which give us the capability for Verizon LTE connection out on the field, so that we can perform all our reports right there on the scene, and while we're in the ambulance during transport and stuff, which saves us in time after the call for like overtime. That causes us overtime of filling out those run reports and stuff that they need to fill out. So we're actually kind of saving in that part, but we're picking up a little extra in the telephone part, which is our Surface Pros. We added a couple of cell phones to the ambulances so that they have that capability to call, because they call from the ambulance to the ED en route to give a report. And and then we added another cell phone to one of our engines, so when they go outside of town or they go out, they have something to be able to use besides their own personal phone.
Okay, and the water/wastewater going from a projected of 850 to 1900?
That one specifically is just a reallocation of how much of a percentage is allocated to fire compared to ambulance. It used to be 75% to fire and 25% to ambulance, and now we did it 50-50.
What we were counting as, we were counting the building, the structure as 25% ambulance and 75% fire. So now we've just kind of settled that, so it's 50-50 across the board. So we would charge, if we got a bill, we'd charge 75% of the bill to the fire fund on the general fund and only 25% to the ambulance fund. Now we've made that even to a 50-50 split. So it's kind of, they're evened out. It hasn't really gone up, it's just evened out. You'll see it fell in the fire side. Does that make sense? Clear as mud?
Oh, no, I understand what you've done. I just don't understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, and I probably should stress that the fire department funding source is the property tax levy, and so that bears the restrictions of expenditure restraint and levy limits. The ambulance is a special revenue fund, so it's segregated, purely generates revenue on its own, and that's when I had mentioned the transfer to the ambulance fund. Previously, the ambulance fund was running a deficit, or had been running a deficit, and we're just projecting a slight deficit. So it's really, the ambulance fund can generate as much income as it wants, whereas the property tax limits, levy limits, expenditure restraint is very restrictive. So like the contract negotiations, we had a settlement of a 3-year wage increase, and so just by rebalancing those expenses between gives relief to both the general fund as well as accurately accounting for the costs in the ambulance fund. Yeah, I probably should explain that on the front end when I was speaking about the other stuff.
So Brian, if you had to guess, what percentage of your calls are ambulance versus fire?
We're pretty close to that 18% that Wendy identified with it's not so much the call volume. The call volume is mostly ambulance calls. About 83%, I think, is where we're at right now with ambulance calls.
So ambulance fund covering half the cost of the water is still a deal for that fund?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
If we prorated versus on service used?
Right.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, you have for building repair and maintenance, you have 6,000 on each. That's the same building, right?
It's the same building, yep.
And both of those went up this time, so that's not a balancing thing.
No, it's the age of the building. There's quite a bit of different.
Do you have particular concerns about the building, and is this the right amount for that?
It's the right amount to figure out the direction that we need to go, I think. We do have concerns with the building. We have 6 different HVAC systems, so built into this budget, we have a contractor coming in to give us some drawings and some plans on our HVAC system because it's not properly balanced. So our bunk rooms can get up to 85 degrees at night where the guys and girls are sleeping, which, as we all know, that's the most important time for them is to get some rest. And if they can't get that, then during 48-hour stretch, that's pretty tough on them. So we have some areas of where you wish the heat was on because it's so cold you got to wear a jacket. So it's the only place, how they explain it to me, it's the only place that you'll be in the wintertime where the AC kicks on in the wintertime and the heat kicks on in the summer. So it can really, depending upon what side of the building you're in, it really changes a lot. So we need to figure out why it's like that, what thermostat does what, serves what area, and try to balance out that HVAC system. There are those HVAC systems within that building.
And then just a final mention, you'll see this on the debt service as well, but the 2 outstanding debt obligations that are associated with the ambulance special revenue fund are in the bottom of that page, with the 1.3 originally from 2013 and then the 255, which was the last ambulance we borrowed. So just about $1 million of outstanding debt that the city is carrying for the ambulance special revenue fund. If we're okay, we're going to jump into hazmat. This is the current consortium and revenue that we receive for providing hazmat services. There is a potential change in service that might occur in the future that the chief is exploring, but at this point in time, really budgeting for what's known at this time for next year. So really no change. The city participates in a regional or county hazmat response team, and that's kind of the potential changes. We might be able to pick up more of that, potentially more revenue if it does come with it. And then, so you'll see minor equipment, routine equipment is what generally gets charged there. Tank inspection has been really changed or diminished after some state law changes in the scope of what inspections we had previously been performing in the area. And so at this point in time, we're proposing to draw down the funds. The chief has put forward a recommendation to look into leasing a vehicle, though I think at this time, my recommendation would be to actually spend the money that's in this account as a capital purchase like we would normally to get the benefit of being able to trade the vehicle in. I mean, that still can be worked out, but at least in this budget, what's being shown is a replacement of the vehicle. We have at least one fleet need, so it'd be a shuffling of fleet vehicles next year for the, which we'll get into in the inspections department in a minute, for the code enforcement officer to be able to use one of the turn back vehicles that would be otherwise traded in. So that's what's being proposed from the tank inspection budget for next year.
Right, and I just want to speak on, so the vehicle replacement, we forewent the $35,000 in our contingency fund this year, which originally was talked about to go to a chief's vehicle out of the fire fund, but then, it was also kept for the impending CBA. So whatever came out of the CBA is coming out of that contingency fund. So we have given up that $37,500 in that contingency fund this year to cover salaries and whatever else we need to cover. And so we won't go after a vehicle with that capital fund, with that budget request. With the building inspections moving out, we sent a vehicle out with them, so that inspection vehicle went as well. The vehicle was also a station vehicle, and we had a vehicle that could tow our trench rescue trailer. Right now, with Dan and I, we have the 2 support vehicles as response vehicles, and they're take-homes, and we don't have a station vehicle to tow our boat or our trench rescue trailer right now. So our proposal is to trade in Dan's truck, which was going to get traded in anyway. We have a very good trade-in value on it right now. Hopefully we keep that. And we've kind of come to some discussions with some vendors about the municipal lease program, and we could lease 2 vehicles and draw down those funds out of that with 2 vehicles, and be minimal budget impact until the 3rd year of the lease, which at that time we'd have to figure out how we're going to pay that 3rd payment, and then we pretty much own the vehicles for $1 at that point. That's 2 vehicles, 2 support vehicles, and then the truck that I currently drive would move over to be the station vehicle and the vehicle that would tow our trailer and our boat, which we need. And then that actually saves us on the fuel costs as well, because they can take that truck out for the running around and building inspections, fire inspections and stuff like that, and all our nitnoid stuff that we run.
All right, thanks, Brian. We'll move into the inspections office. You'll find that some of the increases here, you'll see the salaries increase. That's attributed to the fact that we moved the code enforcement officer from really an LTE part-time role into a full-time benefited position. So obviously there's corresponding increases associated with that. We had previously had that $17,000 in the 2022 contingency. So that was the funding source. As well as the purchase of the vehicle you'll see down there. Now, the department did request a vehicle, but at this time, as we just kind of talked about with other departments purchasing vehicles, we'll be determining what vehicle will be cycled through as the code enforcement officer vehicle. A couple other changes under professional services, 210. There's the bare wire electric, which we just contracted with for commercial electrical inspections. There's a corresponding revenue to that, which we'll cover at the revenue side of the budget when that time comes. Really, it's a pass-through for us. So, and then we also bumped up travel and training. With a new code enforcement officer, there's an opportunity to also empower that person to become a bit more valuable, and because there's some seasonality to that position, though I would argue they've got their work cut out for them probably for the next 5 years. Just on code and property maintenance issues, but the potential to get that person credentialed to assist in the case of residential inspections. So a portion of that travel and training budget is for that. Obviously, an increase in fuel, grease, and oil due to the fact that we'll have 2 vehicles in there, as well as any sort of mileage reimbursement for personal vehicle use. I think I covered the main points there. But overall, obviously that department has an increase. You'll find in the corresponding revenue, just in the city of Rhinelander inspections, they generate about $150,000 in revenue plus all the townships that we do. So it remains to be a budgetary advantageous service to be providing, though. If volumes or activity levels continue to climb, that may be something we'd have to continue to look at. This also accounts for Robbie to get fully credentialed in the commercial inspection realm. Right now we use RC inspections for a portion of this. And so we were discussing with him getting his final credential. So we won't be paying externally for those like we are doing today. They'll be performed in-house as we used previously with our building and commercial inspection staff.
Question about legal fees. Why do you project it to be less?
Yeah, the legal fees, I mean, it's partially a bit of trending, but it's also due to the fact that we anticipate our attorney to be involved with a fair amount of the property maintenance items. One could argue that those would be general legal expenses too. So it was just more of trending and then just kind of taking an average. You know, the citations and such should be able to be performed by the department. Something we're still talking through and working out as they get fully staffed. Yes.
Looking at 111, the overtime, there's nothing in the budget there. Is there any concern at all about the workload during the summer for staff getting things accomplished during the workday? Is there any concern that there might be a need for overtime
No.
in the next year? Not at all?
No.
No.
So another unique thing about the overtime that's used quite often in like some of the smaller departments is the employee has the opportunity to bank their overtime hours in a comp bank and then take the time off later when it's slow. They
Okay.
can bank up to 80 hours.
Okay, so they're still acquiring
Yes, they
some form of
still
overtime, but it's
do
not
overtime.
budgeted like traditional overtime.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Other questions on inspections? Move into Health and Human Services, which is largely the Oneida County Humane Society contribution. I will point out that they requested $31,790 in some conversation with the mayor, as well as looking at their formula. We're projecting a request or a contribution of $27,000. Something we'll still have to discuss with them, but advising you of that here tonight. And the city and the county generally mirror those requests. So as was the case last year, the county actually came in less than what the city had contributed. So we'll watch what the county does ultimately on that. And next week, okay, great. Sounds like fun. So more to come on that, but that's where that sits right now. Next one is shared ride. This is the taxi service that we have available. Just gonna zoom out here. Oops. We still have yet to take delivery for the vehicle that we had hoped to purchase in 2022. So you'll see a vehicle purchase there, and then the corresponding revenue associated with the state's support of that. We're not projecting a local share next year. From a cost standpoint, there is some outstanding DOT audits. You'll see a negative carrying balance shown on the bottom left corner. I don't know, what are they, 5 years?
I think the last audit that we had done was 2013. So and they have all the information. It's on the DOT side that they had transition in staff, and I'm just waiting for them.
Yeah, this one will be possibly one to watch. You know, we could always look at doing a fare increase if we're looking at a local cost share. We instituted agency fares this year, which obviously had a positive budgetary impact to the revenue associated with that. This year we're projected to carry a cash surplus of $28,595. Any questions? Otherwise, that remains on a 5-year cycle with moving into the 1-year option years now, I believe, starting in 2023.
Yes.
Is that right?
And I'll be bringing that forward to council very soon.
The next one, Special Projects Fund. You'll find there the $1.6 million that was granted or made available to the city for PFAS. We also have the ARPA funds right beneath that, though that's all the 2022. And then tentatively, so we budgeted the full expense of a PFAS project at $1.9 million next year. And then the $75,000 for what was previously contributed or allocated for the skate park is also reflected there.
A unique thing on this budget is we have received the full amount of the fiscal recovery funds, but until we spend them, they won't be recognized as revenue. So it's just going to look interesting with the accounting of it. So down in the fund balance projections, I just added the line of the 2021 unspent ARPA funds. Otherwise, it won't flow into the fund balance.
And part of the 1.6 million is the expectation that the city does have a 20% match. So at least 300,000 will be committed out of the ARPA funds already there. Landfill remediation, the city participates in the landfill group. The one thing I would offer is that the city should consider going with its partners on the landfill trust. That's International Paper, was R. Donnelly, and Twist-Drill, the four of us. Though I think R. Donnelly has gone bankrupt, a receivership, so they're out of the picture. But so the city's cost share increases, though. You'll see that there's going to be a spend down of those funds, and we'll probably need to look at going to market on the remediation expenses just to see if there's another lower cost consultant. We've been using GHD for some time, and previously Sand Creek, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's out of the landfill account. It's a separate trust account from the city's accounting.
So this portion, this budget that you're seeing is the city's portion, city-owned money, and then we contribute into a separate bank account, that's the trust fund. So this is our portion.
But as was mentioned, we'll have to find a funding source, probably the general fund, for future expenses going forward after that 10,000 reserve is spent down. Yes, Gerald.
What does this actually do?
Well, we have an open case with the DNR with an ongoing continuing expectation to deal with landfill reporting and sampling. So they do twice a year visits to do sampling and submit a work plan as well as a summary to the DNR to satisfy their expectations. So it might seem strange, landfill's closed, we don't operate it anymore, but there's an ongoing expectation as one of the owners of it.
That's the old landfill out in the east end of town.
On Old Highway 8, yep, yeah. Correct.
How many more years do you think it's going to be an open case?
Perpetuity. Till the dinosaurs return. Yeah, in all seriousness, it'll be something that will be an ongoing expectation of the cities. So, there's been talk about potentially siting things there. I think those are all potential options to keep on the table, especially if you could generate some income from them. Solar array, other potential compatible uses that the DNR might find acceptable. Property acquisitions, we don't have anything budgeted here. I know Wendy and I went back and forth whether or not we actually budget something there. I hesitate to budget, if we're going to enter a mode of property acquisition, and if we're going to negotiate on the purchase of property, you don't necessarily want to show what you've got saved up in your budget. So we'll use that account as properties come and go, and we would just do a transfer either from surplus or reserve funds or ARPA or any of those other funding sources, borrowing that we might use as a revenue to cover any expenses there. And generally the general fund would cover that shortfall. So if, let's say, we did a property acquisition this year, we would then have the cost covered by surplus dollars or from the general or from reserves. Dental fund, we're not projecting any additional costs to plan participants next year, though you will find, and it's been pretty flat of a program, though you'll find that the ending balance is dwindling. So we'll have to watch the performance of that plan as we go forward to potentially look at dental insurance rates. The next one is the HRA plan, which I'm actually going to have Wendy explain because it's something that predates me, and I can go a little cross-eyed in thinking about how the HRA plan gets budgeted.
So the HRA plan is an option for our employees. If they would like to participate in it, we have a premium for single plus one, or family. And then those premiums go directly into this fund. And it's their claims from it was set up the deductible for our employees to feel like the 2,000, 4,000 plan that we used to have. Right now we have a plan that's a 5,000, 10,000 plan. So if you're single, then the HRA is going to cover that gap from the 2,000 to the 5,000. So it'd be like $3,000 that the city could potentially be paying out for claims till they meet the deductible, where the health insurance picks up 100% after that. So right now, the premiums that have been going in here have been more than enough than the actual claims that we're paying out. Weekly claims are reimbursed to employees, and the city pays for them. So based on the utilization of this, we just increased it to it's being used at about 45%. And one of the things that our health insurance broker mentioned is when you build up a fund balance, some other companies have actually given like a premium holiday, like for like 1 month or something, to give back a little bit to the employees because it's doing well. So it's something we can consider in the future.
The next 8 budgets, eight individual budgets, not pages, are all the TIF districts. Obviously, we've added 2 more TIF districts. There's one in particular, the second one, which is Job Center number 5. We're going to be putting forth a recommendation to close that district. There's no continuing expenses from there, and there's also a small surplus that could be redistributed to the other taxing jurisdictions or potentially to be used for affordable housing, which we'd have to get the Joint Review Board's commitment on that, so that'll be a resolution that the council will be seeing within the next month. I don't really need to speak to every one of the TIF districts. Just know that the cash balances are in the bottom left corner of those. Those are reviewed annually at the Joint Review Board level for performance. And generally, they're all performing, and we can say that now with confidence now that number 8 is back in business after the value of that one came up. That's the downtown TIF district. So now we're back to generating some income there, which is great. The next budget we'll talk to is the Fund 432, the capital projects. This is the Public Works Street Improvement Fund. You'll see some ongoing expenses associated with Stevens Street there next year. And that's just really a spend down of, or a clearinghouse, I should say, right, for the grant and loan expenses. All right, 433. This is the last borrowing that the city did in 2021. You'll see a spend down of everything there. Ideally, that'll be spent with some additional capital purchases and other items that are forthcoming before the council for their approval. So like the IT consolidation, all the public works capital purchases, ambulance, DPW, police, etc. there. So we're still carrying somewhat of an unspent balance, but you'll see that come before you. 434 is the 2023 capital budget. Next year, if we keep the cadence of every other year for our borrowing, another $1 million issuance with borrowing costs there. We've talked about things like the police vehicle, some of the DPW and parks capital purchases, some parks improvement. Finer details are still forthcoming on that budget, but that gives you a sense of generally where those allocations are looking to be spent next year.
Can you speak more to the transfer to bike and ped fund, 100,000?
Yes, so we tentatively have that earmarked for Heel Creek or Northwood Trail development. So that's a small match to what we were hoping to have match, which is that other 100,000 that the donor has tentatively pledged of the total 500,000. So we're planning a $600,000 project if all fundraising goes well on the trails development out there. So that's the 100,000 it'd be contained in the bike ped budget.
And why are we using long-term borrowing for the transfer to share ride? Shouldn't that be just general fund?
If we had a funding source, yeah. I mean, if we have levy capacity and expenditure restraint, we could use the shared ride. That's the purchase of the van. So it is a capital expenditure, so it does make sense to pull it from borrowing. That's our local share on the shared ride van that we purchase. Other questions on borrowing? Obviously, it'll be a different interest rate environment now when we go back to borrow this next round. But we get the benefit of the interest on our savings. Okay, Fund 435 is the closeout of the 2018 fund, so nothing really to report there other than because there's activity this year, it'll still carry forward as we carry on. So that concludes what we have prepared for budgets today. We've got obviously a council meeting after this, but the next budget meeting is set for next Wednesday at Northwood at 5 p.m. So at the golf course to talk about the master plan as well as the golf budget and then any other ancillary budget questions or updates that we might have at that time.
Okay, any questions? Not seeing none, it's 5:47, meeting adjourned.